So I'm ready for the first question.
How did it feel to be separated from your mother and sister and housed with the boys in the camp?
So when on arrival in Terezin, I was separated from my mother and sister and put into a room of 40 boys, all my age. It didn't seem to be the worst thing in the world. We were not harassed on a daily basis, and our teacher, Franta, tried hard to make us forget that we were prisoners and instead tried to provide education for us via surreptitious lectures and coach us to work together and become one of the best soccer teams in our age group. Franta became our father and mother and took very good care of us. My mother and sister lived fairly close by, and so I got to see them fairly frequently.
Do you think you would have kept up the violin? Do you have music in your life today?
I don't think I would have kept up playing the violin. The scratching noises the beginners make is not music to my ears. What instrument do you play? Do you play anything or do you just sing?
Well, I play violin. I'm not a big fan of it either. It's hard for me too.
I see. You are more courageous than I was. Unfortunately, I never did get an opportunity to play any musical instrument except for the harmonica, which I played while I was in Terezin.
We noticed a picture in your book of you and your friends from Dorm 7 at a reunion. How was it for you to go back there?
Over the years, we corresponded, but it wasn't until 1992, after the communists were overthrown, that we managed to get together again. We had a reunion in Prague, which was attended by 18 people, including their wives. We had a great time being together again and reminiscing. I, for one, had not been back to Prague in 43 years, and it was great walking around the narrow cobblestone alleys and buying fresh kolačky, like Danish with jam on top, for breakfast. Since then, we met every 4 or 5 years in Prague.
Do you think the challenges you faced gave you a different perspective on your values? And how did the personal experience inform you later in your life?
I feel I have a certain burden to bear. Some 1.5 million Jewish children perished during the Holocaust, many of them much more talented than I am. You were reading the magazine Vedem, I think. You know what I'm speaking about. What a terrific bunch of young writers, poets, illustrators they had in room 1. So I try to do the best I can in not only the memory of all these Jewish children whose life was cut so short, but also in memory of my parents and other close relatives we lost.
How did your mother get her collection and Michael's memory book out of Terezin safely?
What you have to remember is that the Terezin was not an extermination camp. It was a transition camp set up by the Germans to show the world how well they were treating the Jews. We did not have the striped uniforms which the prisoners in Auschwitz had. We wore our own clothes. We slept in a 3-story bunk setup, but each boy had his assigned bed and could keep his possessions under his pillow. And that's how I saved my memory book, which has a separate page from many of my friends and was put together in 1943, or a couple of years before we were liberated. My mother, while in Terezin, was collecting the various pieces of memorabilia, which she probably stored in the suitcase that we brought our clothes in. And she didn't make an album of it until after we were safely in Prague.
What advice do you have for kids these days?
And so I have 2 pieces of advice. First, don't get married to your possessions. Most of them can always be replaced. We lost all our possessions. When the Germans came, my parents sent many valuables like carpets, paintings, books, silverware for safekeeping in a warehouse in London. And after the war ended, we learned that the Germans had bombed that warehouse and we lost everything there without getting any compensation. And now you should see all the junk I have acquired over a 52-year period in my house. A lot of it. So don't get married to your possessions. You can always replace them. The second advice I would say is don't ever take a no for an answer. I learned that from my mother. If you go to 10 people and they all say no, go to the 11th and you may get a yes. When I wrote a children's book and had the bear narrate the story about how he saved us, I first sent a query letter to some 80 literary agents. Most agents didn't even respond, and those that did said that it was not a subject that they were interested in or they were too busy already. So then I decided I had nothing to lose, and I wrote to about 80 publishers, and I got the same responses. So after 2.5 years of getting nowhere, I suddenly, out of the blue, received a phone call from an editor from Aladdin Books, a subsidiary of Simon & Schuster, saying that they believe there's much more to the story than what I wrote about, and they would like to send a professional writer to Boston to interview me and help me write up my story. And the rest is history.